Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Toploader titled Dancing in the Moonlight. And if we switch over to here, we have it on the YouTube screen. This is another one of the tracks alongside the other few that I've reviewed recently, where these are songs that my students quite like and we're learning them. This is a drum song. The drums are apparently, I think they're grade 2 if I'm not mistaken, or grade 3, I could be wrong. Could just be doing a terrible job on my part of remembering which number. But anyways, we're going to listen through this track from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's get into it. Dancing in the Moonlight. Very nostalgic for me as a 90s kid. Used to be on the radio all the time, you know? Are there upper harmonies? The guitar attack is very bold on the left of the stereo field. It's very unconventional actually, having the kind of very sort of solid guitar take in the second line half of the verse, and then having another kind of strummed sort of single coil on the other side doing some funk chords. It's not stuff that you necessarily hear when you're listening to it through headphones. I think part of that is the era where this was produced. I think you didn't have cell phones back then playing the music where people just listened to it like through its phone speakers. You were listening either through speakers or headphones. Not that you don't have earbuds now, but you know what I mean. And so I just think it's kind of cool, these design decisions that have been made in the stereo field, but they're asymmetrical as well. So you're kind of caught by surprise and have a different experience with this way of hearing it. Old Cossack dance there. Nice. Great use of vocal fry there. Interesting focus on the keys. And drums there. Vocals, of course. With a weird sub-bass resonance. Now that's kind of fascinating. I've had a completely different experience listening to this isolated, actively, as opposed to in the past or even during sessions with students. I think it's been really nice to hear it like this, and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Toploader titled Dancing in the Moonlight. I'm starting to sort of associate these review videos, these SP review videos, as being a bit more sort of like casual, but at the same time I feel like they're eye-opening for me personally. I think that this song, if I'm honest, after listening through it and sort of vibing on to the lyrics, is simply more about coming together and dancing in the moonlight and having fun and not fighting and just sort of enjoying your time being sociable. And it's very nostalgic and it's got almost sort of vintage aesthetic to it, despite the fact that I think a lot of really trendy stuff was attempting to being shown in this video. The 90s is a weird time where like everything seems so new and hip and stuff like that, almost like I suppose people felt in the 80s. But in the 90s we were on the cusp of the internet and everything like that. It was a kind of a wild, kind of flagrant time. But I love the innocence of this track. I know this isn't like an original song. I know this is like their version of another one, by another band, I think. Yeah, I think the initial one released in 1973 was by King Harvest. So this is not their original song, but I feel like it's a fantastic rendition and effort on their own there, and I think it's a exquisite display of how, you know, doing a track in your own way can make it yours, I suppose, to an extent, as long as it's transformative enough and you still give credit to whoever did it initially, you know, for obvious reasons, especially given nowadays with the copyright stuff we have. And I don't know, but anyways, focusing on this song, I think that's what the song's about. That's what we think the track is about. It's the vocals are sung really well. I think that he hits the notes cleanly. He's very comfortable in his head and chest voice, very comfortable exploring his vocal range there. There's a kind of like suave nature and expression to it there. We're not sort of over communicating or over committing to it, you know. But it's like calm and calculated, it's kind of cool sounding. Bit of vocal fry and a bit of kind of like raunchiness to it occasionally, especially near the end as we kind of like ascend, but ultimately just very sort of like satisfying to listen to. There's a bit of romanticism to it, and it's just, you know, it's a very effective track on the mic and a very effective vocal performance. And then we had like backing vocals as well and extra bits of kind of like layering in the chorus sections, which I think just makes the vocals sound bigger in the mix and like adds a bit of differentiation there. Also, the warmth of the triads and harmonies that were present there kind of like sweetens it a little bit. I just think it's a nice way to go between them. But there's also like very sort of like little kind of lead guitar takes, and then of course the organ solo that you have later on that sort of like are alt leads, and there's enough variety in there to sort of make it worth listening to. So I think the vocals do a great job of kind of like emphasizing what the song is about and kind of suiting it and connecting with that. The track itself at 3 minutes 45 just is very well structured. It's got this iconic intro section with the keys there, and you kind of have the sort of like more keys on top of that. You have organs, and then you actually have actual keys there. And I think you have the bass as well come at the start. Oh no, never mind. I keep misremembering it, I suppose. When the drums, the bass, and everything else do come in, though, it adds a lot of flavor and power to it, and the vocals on top in that upper range is just very like nicely positioned. You can hear everything clearly. It's a fantastic sort of introduction. You have that main melody, and then there's further sort of like elaboration about what the sort of scene is trying to represent after the first like 10 or 15 seconds. Structurally, there are verses and choruses, there's little instrumental breaks, like the 16th note kind of break beat that we have on the kit there with a different sounding drum kit, like after the first verse or halfway the stanza, which is just a really kind of like neat idea there to sort of change the tone of the drums to kind of make it a bit more kind of like groovy. It's more intense than the regular drum beat that you have in the verse parts, but I think it's trying to sort of like emphasize what's going on in the chorus. I think it's more sort of like a hint at the chorus to come without fully committing to that yet, because we're not quite there. And like again with that sort of organ solo that we have later on, you have enough storytelling. The 3 minutes 28 is well fleshed out without any filler. Wisely used real estate there. It works well within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot. And there's also some other points of interest from like, again, different guitar leads that kind of like switch things up as we go through. So if we talk about the extra instrumental components themselves, I love the simplicity of the drum grooves with the 8th note kind of heights for a lot of it. The 16th come in on the snares and kicks, and I think that there's enough variation there to sort of keep things engaging there. The guitars work well playing alongside the triads sort of put forward by a lot of the key parts at the start. It's all within key signature. It's relatively diatonic. And there's like a funkiness to some of the picked parts there where it's either on the left or the right side there. And it's either going with the roots or accenting any sort of like extended chords or dominants or major or minor sevenths in the harmony, which I think adds a nice sort of jazzy blend to it. Or if it's got like a kind of a grittier tone during the chorus, it's got a brighter kind of like fuzz to it, which kind of like sweetens up the mix again further to the vocal parts. But yeah, it's that back and forth between the guitars that's kind of cool. The bass line supports the progressions from the piano, keys, and guitar really neatly, and it moves around a little bit with the scale choice, but ultimately it's foundational. I think in that little breakdown part, like around the 2 minute 50 mark, where they have the kind of clapping and they have like a reiteration of the riff, because they do just have the drums and the keys at that part. They're kind of middle-eight-ish kind of, I suppose. It's just fantastic to have the claps take the place of the snares, a more gentler tone, almost to sort of insinuate that there are a lot of people enjoying the party with the people in the band. I think that's just a nice little sort of Easter egg, I suppose. And to be fair, I think there's also the kind of clappy kind of tone as they go through it. They've produced the snare to sound like a clap. It's really kind of fascinating. To work with the keys, to specifically discuss them, I think that they're well articulated on the right hand with the bass being supportive on the left there. We don't overcomplicate the extensions there. A lot of the tricky soloing is done on the specific key itself. Very, very comfortable on that Hammond, I suppose. We've got like a different melody that kind of riffs off in a bluesy way. A lot of what we've done with the vocal melodies and ideas beforehand, while still keeping its own sense of identity. There's a lot of tension when you first start the organ solo, but then when it kind of guts into it, it just kind of like takes little breaks and then kind of like pops off again. And it's just a nice little palate cleanser from a lot of the context we've had until that point. It sort of insinuates that there could be something kind of flashy coming on with the kind of like the articulation at the early stages, but giving it its own time to shine is smart, just in terms of structure, but also in terms of simply making the most of the talent on display. And it's also just again a break from the vocals. So thematically, I think that it works well with the major minor chords, the extensions of the triads, the sevenths, etc. Some sort of like bluesy and jazzy sort of like phrasings with the chords on the guitars especially. It insinuates a complexity of the situation, but the progressions and the ideas, the textures with the instruments, the expression of the vocalist and everyone enjoy, then it's more like a slick kind of suave feel to it, where it's celebrating things in a very kind of cool, chic way. And so I think that it's more endeavored towards the kind of like resolute enjoyment of it, whilst also, again, that style kind of sophistication to it. That's what the chords are trying to simulate. It's not that we're kind of necessarily ascribe complexity or even negative emotions to it. We're simply just trying to chill and have fun and dance through the moonlight. I just think it's a well-performed piece with a really sort of tight instrumental sort of performance, and ultimately there's no notes out of place. So it's just the studio production now, and the studio production is wonderful. I really like the quote-unquote vibe of how things are recorded here. It's not an over-polished performance by far. It's got this sort of analog feel to it, where we do have kind of raw takes on the guitars on either side of the stereo field that deliberately they're not trying to polish or pretty them up. They sound as they sound. It's meant to almost sort of have maybe a live soundish kind of feel to it, which I appreciate. I think if you tried to make it sort of like studio polished and have like lots of reverb tails and stuff like that, that were maybe artificial, it would have been a bit disingenuous. The kind of grainy, almost like spiritual tone of the keys and the organs are a nice sort of flourish there, and like the drums as well, with the different sort of interpretations or like sort of like quote unquote sounds of them, profiles of them are good, and the bass line underneath is relatively subtle. But you just have these combinations together without any weird resonances in the frequency spectrum. Music surrounds you in the headphones with an asymmetrical sort of like positioning of things to sort of keep intrigue and just kind of keep you going back and forth whilst you listen to the story. The vocals are nicely produced. They aren't over polished. The guy can sing. He doesn't need a lot of help and boast at all, really, aside from maybe a bit of compression, reverb, etc., but not too much. And ultimately, there's dynamic range. There's nice fade out at the end, which is kind of sweet. It's a good little sort of like way to sort of like finish proceedings. They're almost like you're fading out to enjoy the rest of the party, and it's nice that without pumping. So the bus compression is limiting as handled. Closing comments on this track. I didn't think I'd enjoy it this much. I wasn't necessarily super excited for this, but after listening through it, I can appreciate the little intricacies there, and I think I understand why people love it. So thank you very much for watching my review of this track from an act named Toploader, titled Dancing in the Moonlight, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as you need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SB Reviews. Spiderhands out.